welcome to the latest episode of the People Will Talk podcast. Joining me in studio is Maria. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You?
I'm very good, thank you. And special guest James Hartley. How are you, James?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me here today, and Maria. It's a real pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours, and there's so much to ask you about, and I really want to ask you to start off about your international background. You're a Liverpudlian by birth, but you've ended up in Madrid, of course, and in between you've been to Oman and Singapore. So I guess this question is a bit two-pronged. Like, what has this international existence been like, and why did you eventually settle here in the Spanish capital?
Yeah, I lived. It's been crazy actually. So I lived the first 7 years of my life in near Liverpool, on the other side of the water, on the other side of the Mersey. And then because of my dad's job, we travelled. So I went to Singapore first, lived there for about 4 or 5 years. After that, Scotland for a year, Oman after that, Muscat. And then I went to university in London. And then I just started travelling around again. Went to France, lived in Ireland, in Galway for a bit, for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And then popped up in Madrid one day because of a friend, I think. And so I was teaching by then, teaching English. And I loved it. I loved the city, and I fell in love as well with a girl here. And really, that was it. It was both things. It was perfect. I don't know. I'd never had really that feeling before. Maybe at home, this felt like another home, and that was it. Since then, that's me. I'm here and Madrid and married, 2 kids, and that's me now. That's the story.
That's very nice that it feels like home now after you've been to so many places, and some of them are so exotic. So
Yeah, it's weird.
that's good.
It's weird because sometimes, like, I feel like it is home. I'm not really. I don't know. I feel like everywhere is home wherever I am. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I don't get sort of sentimental about stuff. But I love Madrid. Sometimes I feel really like I wouldn't say Spanish, but I feel really at home. And then other times, if I have a cup of tea, everybody says I'm super English. If it rains, everybody says I must love the weather. But then if I go home, everybody sort of says, "Oh, now that you're Spanish, you know." So I'm not really anything. I'm stuck in the middle. But I definitely feel like this place is my home, and I love it here.
It's quite interesting because it seems to we've interviewed quite a lot of people that have ended up living here in Madrid for one reason or another. Some of them only came for a couple of days and then just stay
Yeah,
here for years. And yeah, it's quite funny. Well, I think probably, and that might be able to emphasize with that a little bit as well, how you know in the end, like here you're not completely one thing, but then when you go back home you're not completely the other. So it's
and it's
quite a
mostly good.
peculiar.
You know what? It's mostly good because you kind of, now that I've got kids and of course their mom is Spanish and I'm English. We always say to them, "Look, you got the best of both worlds." You know what I mean? I mean, why you don't have to choose. I think it's a lesson for life. Sometimes you feel like you're constantly being made to choose, and you can have both or a lot of things. Why can't you have an English breakfast and then tortilla de patatas for lunch? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Why does it have to be one better than the other? I don't see it. And with regards to Asia or even the Middle East or anything, I think everywhere's beautiful. Scotland, Ireland. Ireland was amazing. The West Coast. Scotland was beautiful. I don't know. I don't know. I don't like the thing of like you have to choose. But it's true that sometimes you don't feel, of a place maybe. Like recently in the European football, everyone's like, "Oh, you must be worried about England." I'm like, "Well, no, not really." "Oh, you must be supporting Spain." "Well, no, not really. I don't mind. I like football. They can't really win." So I don't know. A bit like that.
Okay, well, I will let you say that you weren't supporting Spain just for this once.
I
Uh,
was wearing I was wearing a Spanish top, and my wife was wearing an
okay.
English top. So I'm going to go with
Oh
that.
dear.
We won. We won.
Fair enough. Well, actually, you mentioned your kids. I think they're teenagers, maybe around that
Oh,
age.
very much, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, we wanted to ask you because you have written a couple of books, haven't you, for like young
Yeah,
adults?
yeah,
It feels like teenagers are getting. It gets earlier and earlier, basically, that they become teenagers. Speaking just from my nephews and nieces,
yeah.
that's the case. But when it comes to young adults, I don't know what made you be interested in that audience, and do you think it's particularly challenging? Is it very different from writing other kinds of books?
Um, I don't know. Why did I do it? Because I wanted to. Years ago, I studied Macbeth, the Shakespeare book, when I was at school, and I had no idea about Shakespeare. Thought it was boring. Blah blah blah. Had a really good teacher and loved the play. Loved it. Like it just lights came on, and I mean, when you read a poem, if someone explains it to you, or sometimes a novel or a book or a painting, anything, if someone explains a little bit to you about it and gives you the key, it's a totally different experience sometimes. And for me,
Mm.
that happened with Macbeth, the play. So I'd always had that in my mind. I'd also been to a boarding school because when we were in Oman, my parents decided, okay, look, you're going to have to go to a boarding school to do your exams because the school level wasn't good enough at that time to take sort of university exams. So I'd come from Liverpool like a normal working class, upper working class, just about middle class background, and suddenly I was in a boarding school, So I also had that experience. So I tried to mix the two. So it made sense to me to write it for people about 13, 14, 15 who might have to study Shakespeare plays, who might be interested in the kind of boarding school. I liked, Harry Potter was big. I used to read Enid Blyton books when I was a kid, like the whole boarding schooly kind of thing, magic boarding school. So it kind of, once I had those two things, it wrote itself, the books. And then I thought, okay, they're at a school, they're reading Macbeth, they go into the play for some magical reason they can. And then in the second book, Shakespeare was a student at the school because there's some lost years of his life and so on. I wrote it kind of that way. But I do think these days, teenagers, the range of books that they can choose from is amazing, absolutely amazing. I mean, there's so many. If you like vampires, boarding school vampires who are actually mermaids, there's probably 150 books like that. Do you know what I mean? And there's always 3 or 4 of each one. It's amazing.
The whole Shakespeare thing is really interesting because I think there's a bit of a debate now if Shakespeare he's too entrenched in the curriculum of different countries, and that
Yeah,
maybe as important as he is, of course, there's no one denying that maybe there should be space for other books. As you said yourself, there's so many books out there. Do you feel
yeah.
that Shakespeare could be maybe the spotlight on him could be reduced just a little bit,
Me
maybe?
personally, no, because I'm a fan, and I say that really. I know how it sounds. I know how it sounds. I do agree that there's a couple of books. I mean, we could sit here all day, and there's quite a few books that I think get repeated over and over. The Shakespeare thing, there's 2 Shakespeares because there's kind of the William Shakespeare, this sort of oh god, I don't know how to describe it. Like there's sort of, you think of the plays and Gielgud and that way of speaking, which isn't even the way the plays were spoken. If you've been to Stratford's nowhere near London. It's got nothing to do with London or sort of posh. The plays are nothing to do with sort of poshy, snobby. It's nothing to do with that, really. It's hard to explain. It's a bit like what's happened to Cervantes, to Don Quixote here, It's become like this sort of monolith that's kind of scary to see, but really it doesn't represent, when you read it, it's nothing to do with that. So Shakespeare, no, because I think there's so much life in it that I think his way of seeing the world was still, at least in, like, I still don't think there's much better than him. But I agree with you that in some cases, yeah, for me, the sort of turning him into this, it's Shakespeare. That I agree with. That I think is rubbish. But studying a bit of him, no, I think it's, as far as English literature goes, I would defend him. But that's just me personally. I get the idea that it's old and But no, I disagree. I know I'm a bit sound like a, but no, I got a lot of time for him. Still don't know much better, at least written in English.
I think that's fair enough. Like, he is definitely an amazing writer. In my opinion, it'd be great to see other. I think, for example, he was on the run for a few years as a, in a Protestant country as a Catholic. Wasn't he there's part of his life that I think is very dramatic and very interesting, that it'd be interesting to open up other facets of his life and have
Definitely.
content about that, But I think what's interesting about what you said is that it's about opening up the language. And this kind of links to the question I wanted to ask you about being the associate editor of Tint Journal, which you are.
Yeah.
And what this is interesting is, like, it's a literary journal where all the contributors are writing in English, but English is their second language. And it has it's so amazing. And its mission is essentially to build cultural bridges and showcase that non-native speakers can write powerfully, because they're choosing their words more precisely. I mean, it's so wonderful. Could you just tell us more about this project?
Yeah, basically, I love books and writing and sort of that. So working in Spain, obviously, I did some books for the school. I just get the feeling sometimes that I don't know the literary world, the bits that I see, it's quite closed off. And again, it's a bit like Shakespeare. They show one side of it, and it's all a bit ivory towery. I don't know, or it's closed off, or it seems that way. I don't know. So anyway, I was looking through, is there a magazine for, like, if I had some good students at school who can write brilliant poetry in English or brilliant stories, looking for somewhere for them. Sometimes people send me stuff to, James, what can I do with this? Blah, blah, blah. So I was looking through and I found it, and it comes out of the University of Vienna, I think it is. They have like a grant to run it. And I contacted them, really asking them where do I send things? And also just straight up, guys, do you have any, I'm interested in the project. And they wrote back and said, well, look, we always need, well, you're lucky there's an editor is gone or whatever, one of the good timing things. And so I joined last year, I think. And great. I mean, it's amazing. The level, I mean, even that, the stories are brilliant, and they have a very clear kind of editing policy. I mean, it's very much leave things as they are, I mean, English is English. It's just different. For me, the beautiful thing is it's different experiences recorded, different points of view, different ways of writing as well. But I don't really feel, when I read it, you don't feel it's anything strange or I don't know. It's just stories and poems, and I just think it's a lovely idea. I don't know. It's an interesting. I enjoy doing it, and it's really interesting work, I guess you call it. But I think it's a great initiative.
Murakami
I completely agree. Yeah.
Sorry, Marie. No, sorry. I was just going to say Murakami famously wrote his first novel in English as a way to excise all the unnecessary elements from the story. And
yeah, well, Conrad's another one. Like this, Nabokov as well. Like there's people that write not in their first language better than, not better. You know what I mean? Like fantastic work, really. I just like it because you get everything. You get different perspectives. You get different views. It's just another of those things. That why is it got to be better or worse or different? It's just another stories. You know what I mean? More and more.
No, I was gonna say, I think it's definitely, well, obviously, as a speaker of English as a second language, it's right on my street. But I think it's a very interesting topic because when you're translating, like working as a translator, sometimes you don't realize, or when you read the English text, it might seem okay, but then when you actually try to translate into Spanish, then you realize that it's shortcomings. So, what things should be or could be clearer and so on. So when you're writing in English as a second language, you're constantly kind of like doing that process. So so I was very excited to read about it, because it is true that it's a very interesting process that doesn't happen if you're a native, and when you're writing in your own language, whether it's English, Spanish, or whatever. Yeah, you don't pay so much attention to all the details, and you take things for granted, and then
Do you not
when you're
think as
writing
well,
a second
Maria? Like,
language, yeah.
I think when you speak in two languages, you're like, I sometimes think, wow, in English, you have a kind of a slightly different personality. Like
Yeah.
like I don't speak, obviously my Spanish isn't as good as my English and written words. So my personality changes because I have to use different language to express
Yeah,
myself. Do you know what I mean? It's like
definitely.
sometimes
Yeah,
it's even two different voices. Like when you speak with a higher or lower voice, or
yeah,
I find it really,
yeah.
and then if you get to the level of idioms and things like that, you choose different idioms. And I don't know, it's for me, it's fascinating, the whole thing. And of course, if I compare it to what, like, I always think, wow, like the level of being able to write a story in a language that isn't your own, or a poem, is incredible for me.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this in the podcast before, in the past, and I think both Anne and I have spoken about this thing of like this alter ego that you end up creating when you're speaking in the other language, and sometimes even like maybe if you're a bit shy, you actually feel more confident in
Yeah,
the
I
other
agree.
language because you're not hearing, you cannot hear yourself, so you have less prejudice against what you're saying, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I agree totally. It's a weird
so
thing.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of fascinating and weird at the same time. But actually, we're this is going very meta because we're in an interview, and we also wanted to ask you about an interview, because in the Madrid review, which is your newest project, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. You interview a lot of people as well. Now you're being
Yeah.
an interviewee, but you actually interview a lot of people there. So, why do you find what is it that you like about interviewing? Why do you find it interesting?
Oof, good question.
Mhm.
Why do I find it interesting? That wasn't what I expected. I thought you were going to say, how'd you do it? I don't know. Why do I find, well, I guess to hear the opinions of the other people, meaning a lot of the time you kind of hear the same stories. You guys must hear this. Now a lot of the stories, like writers or they tend to have a similar story, published or not, that they start very young, they read, uh, they sort of read voraciously anything, like all types of books, maybe write, uh, kind of enjoy English or whatever it is, literature or lingua or whatever, and history or whatever, things like that. Read a lot, write stories for their friends, kind of introverted, touchy, artistic. Like, it's always the same kind of story. That part is interesting for me, to hear the same. So you kind of feel like, you're not alone. For me, it's there's a kind of creative type as well. Like, I see it in schools a lot. That it's kind of, writing is their first language, like speaking is their second language. Sometimes we learn as you get older. I think as a child you can be more introverted because you read a lot and you have your own imagination a lot. So you either can be extrovert or you can socialize. But sometimes I think the kind of creative types look a bit weird, I don't know, odd. But that's the kind of artistic type. You learn as you get older how to deal with it and how to relate to people and cover it up and what you can say and what you can't say. But I think that side of it is really interesting for me, and to know what was their process. They have strong relationships with books. They love books, the smell of them, and that side. And then also the other side, I love the differences. So I love finding out, when do people write? What do they do? How do they deal with? Because sometimes it's when it's a famous person. How do they deal with fame? Some of these people sold 11 million books, like the John Boyne. I was like, how do you feel when you? It must be such a weird thing to happen to you, that everybody, it's kind of the writer's dream. No, you get on the train or the metro and everyone's reading your book, but is it so good, or then do you have to do that book again? Or so I don't know. There's always an aspect of it, and I also think that writers always want to talk. So there's always creative people always want to talk. I just find them interesting. I don't find actors very interesting. I don't find, I love football, but watching interviews about football, I find awful. Politicians, I'm not that interested. But artistic people, I can sit and watch hours of it. I don't know why. I just find it fascinating. Just I'm a weirdo for that kind of thing. I love it. Poets talking about poetry, I'll just sit there. Oh yeah. Love it. Just an interest.
I'd say a lot of writers are just lonely, they spend so much time on their own. So when they talk, it's a pleasure for them.
I agree. But you know what's worse? Translating. Like, I don't know, you were talking about it, Maria, but my wife's a translator, and that's a lonely job as well. Mm-hmm. Like writing is the thing with writing. I agree with you, Enda. They want to talk, writers, because they're stuck on their own with all these people. Imagine. And I don't know about you guys, but if I say to my wife, "Oh, I had a brilliant idea," because we're always having ideas, that you see someone or something, and it's like, "Oh, but what if I say that to my wife, she just glazes over, like, oh God, no, please, no, not another book idea. Don't tell me that." So writers are always, you have to keep it in your head. You make notes everywhere. You're linking things up. You're thinking about this book, and then you rush to the end. And you know what it's like. Crazy. So someone actually wants to ask you. It's like, oh yeah, I'll talk about
it. One thing you mentioned a little bit earlier as well in your previous answer is like interviewing people, you get to hear variations of the same thing perhaps, and that's interesting that there's this commonality perhaps. And in our podcast, I think we have found that where there's a lot of people who are teachers like ourselves, and they have a project that they do that is interesting. So what I've noticed about your two projects, the Tint Journal and the Madrid Review, is that you have access to amazing people like John Boyne. Both websites look amazing. I've seen a picture of the print edition of the Madrid Review as well. It's gorgeous. It looks so nice as well. So for all those like teachers out there who like teaching, but they want to do something else that maybe sparks their inspiration and their imagination, do you have any advice for them in terms of like how to get something off the ground? Because clearly you have a talent for this kind of stuff,
No, I wouldn't say like this is something that's worked, but I've done a million things that haven't worked. Like, so the thing is, for me, for example, with this one, and some people have told me this since, I just thought, I've seen lots of litmacs online now, like on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. I've sent poetry to them, published poetry in a couple of them, and I just got this feeling of like, wow, I wouldn't mind. Like, there should be one. Imagine doing one. And then I thought, oh. So I asked around, and then some people are like, well, I don't know, I'm a bit busy and what. And I'm not really a bossy person. I'm not like. So I thought, I'll try. I'll try, because there isn't one. There's the Paris Review, the New York Review of Books, the London. I'm like, the Madrid Review sounds good. Where is it? Do you know what I mean? It should be there. And so I thought, well, I'll do it. And to be fair, like normally the first advice would be if the old classic, like it's like if there isn't a book that you want, that you want to read a book that isn't there, you have to write it, which probably I've found out the problem is sometimes nobody else wants to read it either, but that's fine. But you've written it, you've got it out of your head. This one for me didn't feel like work, felt like a hobby. And I thought, well, I'll just have a go. I can see how other people are doing it. You invite submissions. And then I thought, well, I don't know if you guys have suffered this, but if you're marketing a book or something like that, it's horrendous. You've got to sell yourself all the time, and it's embarrassing. Or I don't know if you can do it. Some people have a talent for it, but it's constant social media now and crowing about yourself. But if it's something that's secondary to you, so for example, your company or a podcast or for me, this magazine, it's another thing. It's not me saying, hey, look at this, look at me, I wrote this, or please read my book. And the criticism when it comes isn't at you directly. You know, I hated it, I loved it, I didn't like it, this was good, this was rubbish. And it kind of, I didn't care. I was like, well, I'll try. And then I got lucky because I got an interview with Santiago Posteguillo and Paul Preston. Paul Preston as well, who both said yes. Like I wrote to them, contacted them. Both said yes. I mean, you know, guys, when you ask people, I just thought, well, I'll go for the ones I want, you know, like a couple of names. I thought I want a couple of names, and I had another friend who agreed to do book reviews. He works in the book trade, Cliff, and he was like, I can get some advanced copies, and he loves books. He's very, I got a feeling off him as well, like, oh yeah, he's up for this, you know, same as me. And then if anybody, I asked a couple of other friends, and anybody that was like, well, maybe. I mean, what's it like? Are we going to get paid? Are we going to? And well, no. You know, of course, no. You know. I mean, no, in a nice way. But you know, you get this feeling of like, okay, yes, no, and got a nice little group, and then got nice people. Like you said, a lot of famous. I don't know if you found this, but the more famous people are, the nicer they tend to be, and the less famous, the more difficult they can be. So I think famous people have seen it all the way up. They know what's going on. They've seen the industry as well. Like you guys have worked in publishing. Now you've seen it from more angles than just below, you know? So I think they see it as a different thing. Like if you, for example, I look up when people have books coming out. Recently, Joanne Harris had a new book out, the Chocolate Lady, the author. So I asked her, look, can we do something for your book the same time it comes out? And of course, she's like, yeah, great. No, for her, it's great. And for me, it was lovely that I had an interview with her. So I'm rambling now, guys. Sorry.
No. It's fascinating because I think what you said, like we always say to people, we interviewed Irina Vallejo because she's the most famous person we've done. But I bring her up here because she actually was also one of the nicest. She was so generous with her time. And as you said, like we have found as well with her and other people with various levels of success that the higher they are, the nicer they tend to be.
Yeah.
You know, she was, and you know, just with her career in general as well. Like I think she every so often publishes a book with a small publisher as a way to promote that small publisher. So that is absolutely incredible. And just like as you said, it's like selling yourself. Myself and Maria yesterday, we went to 3 bookshops to try and get a book that we've published for another guy stocked. And before going to each one, there's that little kind of mentally steeling yourself. Okay, let's just go in and have this conversation because you're worried about the rejection. But actually, we're so relieved that each person treated us so nicely in each workshop. It was just like a relief, you know, just to be well treated, you know, when you're selling yourself like that.
I think then you get the feeling. You also get that feeling of, okay, like that yesterday with you guys at the bookshop, you suddenly think, come on, we can do this. You just have to go in and do it. And people are nice in general if you're nice, you know. I mean, that's the rule. It's one of the rules of life. Sometimes they're not, but you know what I mean. You have to trust also, if you take a knockback when it comes, I think you take a knockback and learn from it. You know, if you were wrong, you're wrong. If you weren't wrong, was you carry on. No, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of interesting things there, because, well, obviously we can empathize with that, and sometimes maybe you just don't ask because you think, well, I mean, you know, there's just no way this person is gonna talk to you, and then as you say, well, you think, okay, I want to go for this person, I'll just try, and many times it doesn't work, but others it does. But and I think I'm interested in what you said is. Because you were talking about like being kind of like 2 different people when you're talking in 2 different languages, and this almost felt like, you know, another version of that, because or I don't know if you agree, because, you know, you are one person, maybe the creative type of person maybe is more, well, not necessarily, but like you said, like maybe it's like lonely, or I don't know, they're like more in their own world. But then obviously when you're trying to do this sort of thing, you have to be a lot more, you know, extrovert
Definitely.
and be forward, sell yourself. So do you think it is the case that you also end up kind of like having these two personas? You reminded me a little bit of teaching as well, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, when you're teaching, you also become, this other person that is like a bit of an
It's every
entertainer or
for me it's life, you know. Like how
Mm.
many people are you? I'm at least 5 or 6. You know what I mean? Like it depends. Like at school, I'm Mr. James, and Mr. James, I quite like him. He's all right. He's good to me, but it's a particular way I have to be at school. You know, the writing guy. I don't know. Now I'm quite used to him, and that feels like the real me, maybe. But he doesn't really speak. Then I'm the husband. I'm the dad now. You know, dad is like a pain to be. Like it's horrible, but you have to be that. You know the same people. Some people put you in or try and put you into a role. Sometimes that's the big thing. And as you get older, you don't want to. You don't want to, or you accept it, or you don't. No, some people want you to be. You feel them putting you in a kind of. They think that you're this, so you're going to be this, and but that's humans. I think it's an interesting thing. There's loads. You have many different selves. The weird thing with this me that's talking to you now, I feel crazy. This me that's talking to you, the sort of James, the editor, that guy, is a bit like it's just me normally. This is a bit me, and I feel like normal me because this is also the way that I'm trying to do the magazine at the moment, trying to be human and myself because I'm not doing it for money. It's not to be paid. It's a hobby, and I don't want to go into kind of, I don't know how you'd say it, like starting with the not categorizing, but you start going into very highbrow or I don't know. At the moment, I just want to keep it very open and kind of human. I don't know how to describe it. Like it's the same thing as the poetry. When I read it, if I decided the first issue because, of course, when you see it from the other side, you guys must know this. You suddenly get these manuscripts, and wow, it's quite a responsibility to have to suddenly. I mean, you have your subjective response, which is, "Oh, I like this," or "I don't." But then you have this other level of, "Oh my God, now I've got to tell someone I don't like it, or I don't want it," or and it is quite a hard thing, no, like to tell someone or to think I don't like that. But you have to make a decision. Well, I like this, or I think this is good, or I think this will sell, or I think other people will be interested in this. I think that's a thing that comes with the magazine or with receiving things. Guys, I'm sorry about the noise in the background. The guy is now cutting the grass right outside my window. I don't know if you can hear that. Right.
Don't worry. It adds color to the podcast. People can imagine themselves in this Spanish soundscape. But we just came across you recently. We're definitely going to put links to both your journals and magazines in the description so people can follow you. Honestly, we're both big fans of what you're doing, and we wish you the best of luck in particular.
I love what you guys are doing too. I was looking through the books yesterday. The one about the craters is amazing, and Seamus Heaney's trip as well. Do you guys write together then?
We do,
yes, we do.
Really? How does that work?
Well, Maria, how's it work for you?
This is James. This is like a number one question we get asked.
Yeah. But it works. It works for you guys.
I do the dictation. She does the typing. That's how we break it down.
Oh, shut up. No, I mean it works well. It sort of ties in with I'm sure you'll perfectly understand it because after what we've been discussing for the whole podcast, I mean when you have like-minded people and you sort of like what they write and understand why they write and kind of like know why they write it the way they write it and have translated them and so on. Like we have each other, then it just it just comes naturally and well.
It's like a dream. That's like a dream. That's like a dream for me, though, that you've got someone that you can write with, who you actually both connect. I always think that when you hear about the old Hollywood films where they sit in a room, or I don't know, Friends or something, where they all sit and they they kind of bang out scripts and plots, and this one says, "Oh, but what about?" Because normally I do that with myself, which isn't fun, you know. But if you do it with somebody else and you respect their opinion and you respect their writing, that must be amazing. I'm jealous, basically.
Well, if you ever want to write a book with us in the future, we can do it all. 6 hands in the book.
Be collective.
But James, let me say it's been a huge pleasure having you here. Thank you so
guys.
much. Honestly,
thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me. Good luck with everything with the books.
Thank you. Likewise, Jim.